Hello and welcome to Placing People First, a Next Phase podcast celebrating innovations in life sciences. So we're always interested in talking to industry heads and thought leaders who can talk about how ultimately patients can benefit from embracing new technology and new ideas. And I'm delighted today to be joined by Roger Shaw. Good morning, Roger.
Hi, Steve.
Firstly, he's one of the nicest people you could ever meet. And secondly, the company that he's the co-founder of, Digital Lab Consulting, has a really interesting view of the industry and can look very objectively at both larger and smaller businesses when they're looking at potential digital transformation projects. And that's what this podcast today is all about. So the purpose of this podcast is to explore, is there ever a good time to go through a digital transformation? So, Roger, if you could please give us a little bit of introduction to yourself and Digital Lab Consulting.
Hi, Steve. Thanks very much for your kind intro. A bit of background. I'm Roger Shaw, one of the co-founders and managing partners of Digital Lab Consulting, or DLC as we like to be known. My background is I'm a scientist by training, by heart, but I've worked almost all my career in technology, life science, both for large and big companies. But really, the focus has always been on helping the companies I work for or with using technology in their digital technology in their environments. So a little bit about DLC. We set up almost 4 years ago now, with the sole aim of providing independent strategic and business consulting, primarily into the life sciences market. We noticed when we set up the company, there was a really big gap of truly independent thought leaders and companies in the market to help advise and support other companies. So we really wanted to try and provide our experience, background, know-how, tricks of the trade, and knowledge of the market to help other companies. And that's where we are today.
Excellent, thank you. So, in our position as recruiters, we work with a lot of different companies. Some of them are long established biopharma companies who've been around for decades, and others who might be startups, maybe academic spin-outs, or companies that just maybe received an initial wave of funding and have very, very specific targets to move to the next stage, move into clinical trials. And something that we often hear from people within larger and smaller companies is that they can see the benefits or potential benefits of having a fully digital lab or to embrace digital technology more, but maybe it's not a top priority. Maybe it's something that is further down the line after they've hit certain milestones. So something I'd be really interested to explore is there ever a good time? And maybe starting with the really well-established companies, people who've been around for a long time, who have paper-based systems, and they're so used to those paper-based processes that to go down a digital transformation route is going to presumably be quite an upheaval. So first of all, I mean, is a paper-based lab setup sustainable long-term in the modern world?
Yeah, I think. Well, first of all, Steve, I think the answer is no. I think that being very, very straight.
Okay.
I think the as you say, the processes have been running and they often work. We often hear it works for us. Our process works. We don't need to change. But I think we've all seen, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, where people are having to work more remotely. They're having to work smarter. You're seeing a lot more collaboration right across the industry. That working with paper, but not just with paper, but also with standalone files and Office documents and their file sharing and email are just not sustainable in today's world. So, yeah, absolutely not. I think that we're seeing a really big shift in companies now moving towards digital transformation, not only in certain areas, but across their whole organization. So it's really been a trigger to go through that.
So what advice could you give to scientific or technical department heads who are meeting internal resistance? They can see the benefit of moving down that route, but are maybe being challenged internally.
Yeah, it's a good point, really good point raised, Steve, and it's something that we often see, and at the end of the day, it's all about change management within the organisation, and that's change management not just in for leadership and the budget holders, but it's change management right across the organisation. So we typically advise and recommend that companies take almost a top-down, bottom-up approach, and really identifying who the key people are going to be impacted by the program, by the digital change in their organisation, and really looking at the things that will influence them. So whether it's at a senior leadership, that's about having a business case, explaining about what, for example, what advantage they can get in either through working with their customers, how they can get drugs to market faster, provide reports to their customers more quickly. But at the lab level, often the teams that are going to be most impacted by the new technology, it's about understanding what difference that's going to make to them in the lab. So what can they do better? What can they do more efficiently? How many of the sort of more routine manual processes that will go in their lab, and putting that together into a communication program that can engage the whole business.
So, I guess you've supported a range of larger and smaller companies going through these kinds of processes, and I guess because you're not aligned to one specific type of software, one specific product, you can be very objective in what's actually going to be the best for the business. So, in general, if a company is going to be going through a digital transformation project, and maybe it is one of those examples, and they've got paper-based systems, they've had them for years, are there any particular bits of advice that you would give for how to prepare? Are there maybe any potential pitfalls that people need to be aware of that they could maybe avoid if they do certain things up front?
I think there's several different areas. I think first of all the change that we've talked about, and making sure there's that really strong engagement with people in the business, and making sure that everybody is aware of what needs to be done. But one of the key things that we see when we start talking to companies is that there's a huge amount of I would say different activities that they want to implement in terms of their business. They're looking at different software, different technology, different hardware, different people and resources being brought in to support things. And I think it's really important that a lot of work goes into prioritizing and not trying to bite off too much stuff at once at the beginning. I think the other area that needs to be very carefully looked at, there's always quite a focus on the software, the nice shiny stuff that they're bringing in, but actually a lot of the projects that are driven by data, people want to be able to access data better, they want to capture data, they want to share it, use it, report it, integrate, do again sort of AI, machine learning, so it's really important. Our key advice is to look at the data strategy and governance aspects of any project towards the beginning, as well in line with all of the other aspects that you're looking at.
Yeah, because I can imagine that if you are going through that process of bringing in some amazing new kit, unless you are fully behind it and you've got the resources and you've got people kind of really bought into it, then you could be spending an awful lot of money on something that doesn't really get used much.
Absolutely, and I think the other thing that we is really important, and we use this sort of analogy a lot, but you're not when you're looking at digital transformation, you're not probably one of the most common mistakes is to try and digitalize what already exists within the business. And it's such a great opportunity to look at and see how you can do things better. So one of the other key recommendations we'd make is that companies really look at, we call it the art of what's possible. So don't be constrained by your current thinking, but actually really look at what you want to do going forward, and take the opportunity to look at your business process, look at how data and materials and flow across the business, and look at how you might be able to improve the way you work and not be constrained by old ways of working.
So that sounds like if you go about it in the right way, it is very much achievable. It's very possible for more established companies to go down a digital transformation route, but there are a lot of things to consider. So does that make it easier for startup businesses to kind of almost get it right, have a more modern setup from day one? Like, if you're thinking about maybe a startup organisation that's recently spun out from university or secured some major funding, is that a really good thing to get up and running right from day one, or is there a particular stage in the company's growth where it's kind of more appropriate to go down that route?
Yeah, I think that's a really really good question. I mean, the timing is the crux of it, and I think you're when we start working with companies, we you can go into organizations that have a really clean slate, and they have such a wonderful opportunity right from the beginning to design how their digital landscape is going to look to support their future business. So they have to, if the company's got a strong outlook, they understand where they're going as a business, what kind of departments, customers they're going to be working with, and what they want to do with their data, then there's nothing to stop them at all by putting in place at least the high priority systems and technologies they need to deliver their business from day one. Um, and what we typically see where clients haven't done that is that there's an increasingly large amount of effort um, to get rid of bad practice and interim solutions and what we call Excel hell, where people are managing stuff in Office documents and file shares and things. To kind of work back from there, it becomes increasingly more difficult as you go through the life cycle of the business. So yeah, I think not starting big, you don't have to do everything at once, but having a clear vision of where you want to get to, and maybe bringing in one or two of the key systems initially is really important.
Because I imagine that there's a big cost implication for embracing really modern technology. And I suppose if you've got a company that is maybe, they have got some quite tight budget constraints, when they're also looking at all sorts of other things that they need to be paying to get set up, I guess it's probably quite reassuring to know that you don't have to necessarily go in for all singing, all dancing, best system possible from day one, but actually you can do things in stages as long as you know what your longer term vision is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the again, it's probably one of the most common um, things to look for is making sure that you've got a system that is capturing data in a way that you want to use it. You'll hear us talk about data all the time when we're talking with customers. I think, with, you're designing a system or a landscape or a digital framework that will be that always has the data in mind that you're going to reuse. And I think from there you've got a great platform then to build the business. And it, as you say, it doesn't have to be the most expensive, the most advanced system right from day one. But if you're capturing the data in the right way, when you do have the funding or the growth, then the ability to migrate or reuse that data in the new system becomes much easier.
Mm. So, with that in mind, is there a particular case study that you can think of, a particular, without mentioning too many specifics if you're unable to, but just any particular case study that illustrates how a company has been able to really embrace a digital transformation in a positive way, make really, really good use of technology, and kind of make sure it really genuinely filters through the organization?
Yeah, I mean we've got several examples, Steve, and I think that the reassuring thing for people, is that it is possible. I think it can seem really overwhelming at the beginning, but if you break things down into those small chunks, then it's really possible. And I've got an example of a company that talked a bit about paper previously, had a really sort of extensive paper-based process right the way across their development analytical organization. They were working across multiple sites internationally. They had many challenges within their organization when we started working with them. They typical things, they had a strong focus on making sure they had good data integrity. They were looking at making their systems and process more efficient. The company were spending a lot of time manually checking each other's work because it was paper based. It had to be visually checked with a 4 eyes principle. And over a period of 2 to 3 years, they gradually bit off parts of that challenge. So they put in place a digital platform that was rolled out to the priority groups first of all. They began, they got the basics rolled out. They then started to integrate their system with key pieces of equipment. And you look 2 or 3 years on, they're now fully digital. They're not using any paper anywhere within their laboratories. They're exchanging data, electronically within the new systems. All of their samples, equipment, and everything are all tracked through barcode readers electronically. So it really is a real success story, and it's the teams that were involved in that were recognised both within their own company, but with the customers that company now works with. When they look in at that company and see their systems, it provides them with a real competitive advantage, a really strong story that they're running their business efficiently and with good quality.
That's amazing. I was going to ask you actually, who would have been the main people responsible for driving that project? Because I imagine that would be quite useful for other companies to understand. Is it lab heads? Is it you're involved in procurement, business, commercial people? Who was kind of involved in really driving that forward?
Yeah, so again, that's a sort of interesting one. I think from this particular company, it was a quality led, quality and senior exec led initiative. So they had two primary goals. One was to address the data integrity and remove paper from their organization, and secondly, it was to provide that outward looking impression of their business to the market. But actually, when it comes to who actually led the project once it was up and running, then actually it was people from within the business. So there was some very strong leadership within the business itself. So people that ran teams or ran departments that really understood how people worked together, what their business processes were, what the real challenges were in the lab. And I think that's one of the keys to the success of their project, was the people involved.
So I guess to summarize, a digital transformation project is only going to be successful if you get real buy-in from key stakeholders within the business, and it becomes something that's integral to the company culture. And it maybe starts off as something that's very instigated by senior leadership and perhaps quality, but then as the project evolves, it's about having the buy-in from other department heads and people who really embrace it and can see the value of it, and then filter it down to their respective teams.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about the ongoing success of the systems or technology that are in use, then those people have been involved in the implementation. They're engaging all their colleagues and peers in the program. They're getting buy-in. It's they're getting that sort of almost managing that change management as part of the delivery. So it's seen as not a system that's being imposed on them by IT or is being pushed out from another department. It's something that they own and are passionate about, and is genuinely helping them in their day-to-day work.
Yeah, because I imagine it will have an impact on everybody, and they might have to do a bit more in the way of systems administration, and so for them to see the longer term value of that is hopefully going to help get people really bought into doing the day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you look at the system administration piece just as an example, there may be an overhead in terms of some of the ownership of the system, and often companies form SME teams that will have certain responsibilities. They might work with some of their IT colleagues to support some of the activities. But if you then look at the time savings that they've made within their labs, within their teams, so it's not unheard of for companies that are using paper or sort of older systems to be spending almost half of their time checking each other's work, especially in a regulated or in compliant environment. So if you imagine taking that overhead out of an organization, the business case is really incredible. So yeah, it's a good price to pay, I would say.
Thanks, Roger, for that example. Just out of interest, are there maybe also smaller companies you've worked with who are maybe slightly earlier in their progression as a business that have maybe embraced that more right from the outset?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we were one really good example, which is more in the advanced therapies space, which has they have their own unique challenges in terms of making sure that their systems work right the way through from sort of early research right the way through to manufacturing. And they were a company that already had a really interesting sort of vision of how they wanted to embrace digital technology. But their company wasn't formed fully at that point, so they were doing a lot of R&D work, but hadn't yet set up their manufacturing facility. So we worked with them, focused on R&D, but with manufacturing in mind. So we helped them really to accelerate that process of choosing the right technology that would support their current work and their future work across their business. And that's really helped them. Again, as a sort of dynamic sort of startup company, they have a lot of remote working. So it was really important for them to embrace cloud technology, which they've done and has allowed their teams to work remotely when they need to, especially through the pandemic. So that's been a really, really exciting project. And that's not just looking at lab-based technology, but it's looking all the way through their organization, from quality management systems through to electronic batch record systems, through to LIMS, through to electronic lab notebooks. So it really embraces the whole organization.
What's next? What's on the horizon? Where do you see things progressing in terms of technology, in terms of the take-up of technology within the life sciences space?
Yeah, Steve, it's really exciting at the moment. I think there's a few different areas that we like. I mean, some of them are you would have heard the sort of you hear about people using cloud technology. That's been discussed for several years now, but it's really being adopted now right across the industry, from not just small startup companies, but right the way through to the larger organizations. So although that's not a particularly new concept, the fact that it's been adopted and really used is really, really exciting, and I think that's going to make a huge difference. But also in the area of we've talked about data quite a lot during our catch up, and I think that there are areas of the business which have traditionally been really poorly served, where data is kind of lost, it's hidden. You often hear the phrase dark data because it's hidden away, and we're really seeing that focus of companies wanting to use all of that data. So whether it's process data or instrument data in development and analytical labs that is typically hidden away on machines in the corner of the lab and never accessed, companies are really now looking at how that data can be brought together and how that can be reused through, again, for driving artificial intelligence, machine learning routines, and driving augmented reality. We saw some really exciting stuff recently in the augmented reality space. Again, it's something that's been talked about and you hear about regularly, but to actually see it in action in development labs where people are walking around their labs, executing processes and assays in the labs is fantastic, using the AR
It's incredible.
technology.
Yeah. I just think there must be so many ways in which that's going to remove bottlenecks and just make things more efficient, and ultimately mean that patients can get treated much more efficiently and much more quickly, which is what this is all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, Thank you, Roger, for your time. And I mean, it sounds like you are often jet setting around the world. So to give me some of your time today has been hugely appreciated. Thank you. And Roger Shaw, the co-founders and director of Digital Lab Consulting, or DLC, who engage in all sorts of different project work to support larger and smaller businesses going through digital transformation projects. So please feel free to reach out to Roger if there's something that your business might be able to benefit from. And please join us next time for the next edition of Placing People First, celebrating innovations in life sciences. Thank you very much. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks very much, Steve.